I've got several projects in the works, but since we have 5 days of cleared weather and I'm stuck at home, I decided to build this little shed that I've been wanting for quite a while now. I've already done the floor. It's laying on 2x4s, pressure treated with a piece of 3/4 plywood, and I built all the walls first and then put the siding on the back and side walls and painted them. And now I'm putting them in position. Since they're facing the fence, I couldn't get to them later to paint. Once I've stood these up, I'm just using one nail. Actually, I'm just using one screw, I should say, to hold them in place. Once all four walls are in, then I went back with the nail gun and put a nail in about every foot, got everything all squared up. This part went relatively easily, although working by yourself sometimes a little more of a pain, but definitely doable. It's not very big, so the pieces weren't terribly heavy. Now these rafters, I just cut these notches in to match the pitch, just by trial and error. Once I got one, I use that as a template for the rest. What's slightly odd about this shed, is it's not 4x8. It's like 3'8", and over here it's only 3 feet. So it tapers down, so every rafter is a different length. A lot of little things that make it a little more difficult. It's up against a fence in 2 spots, so I can't get to the back of it. So what I'm going to do now, I've got these 5-inch bolts for anchoring the rafters down. And what I'm going to do is drill just a little recess in the top so this can go down. My wife has my good ladder, so that's why I'm using this little kitchen ladder. Alright, so you need help. Back. Up. Keep it moving while I'm drilling this through it. Okay, right here. No. I put a 2x4 on the ground to hold the siding up off the ground. I don't want the siding to be touching, so when the ground gets wet it won't weep its way up the siding. There's pressure treated wood down on the ground. Once the piece is in place, I've just using my nail gun with shorter, I think they're 1.5 nails, to nail it in place. Then once it's in place, I'll cut out the opening where the door goes, and I'll save the piece I cut out and use that to put onto the door. To make my doors, I moved to my patio, set up some clamps and some boards, and screwed them together using the same 5-inch screws that I used on the rafters to hold them down. Once I get the boards roughly in place, I'm going to take my tape measure and use it to check the square. Okay, here I'm just checking to make sure they're square. If you get the same dimension on both sides, both diagonals, then that means you're square. So once I know I'm square, I'm tightening all the clamps. Now I'm using a spade bit to drill a little countersink in the wood so that when I put my 5-inch long screws or bolts, the head ends up below the surface of the wood so that when the door is hung, it doesn't hit. Now once the frames are all done, I cut pieces of siding and place them on the ground on my doors and then just screwed them down using some short screws. Maybe, I think they're 1 inch long. I didn't want to shoot this in with a nail gun. I wanted it a little stronger. I was concerned about the doors sagging and I wanted them as stiff as possible. When I installed the roof shingles, I installed a row across the bottom, the first row, upside down, or actually reversed. The rough part of the shingle is still up. It's just that the upper part of the shingle is now the bottom, and that will provide extra strength on the first row. So you can see right there how the shingle's reversed. And then I went back after this row and started another row directly on top of this row. Once that next row was on, then I took 8 inches off each successive row and installed another row from that, which means that the seam in the shingles will shift over 8 inches each time. That way the seams don't line up. Alright, the shed is done, except for painting this trim. This is just primer that came on it. Just want to talk a little bit about it. It would have been a lot easier had it been 4x8 instead of 3'9" and 3'3", and say this angle here wasn't 90. But all in all, I'm happy with how it came out. Something on pricing I'd like to go over. The most expensive part really was like this trim. There's $120, $130 worth of trim. This siding was T1-11, I believe. $35 a sheet, and it took 5 sheets. So, you know, about $180 for siding. The roofing material took more than one package, one square, 32 square feet. So I had to buy a second package, and I only needed 3 more out of the second package, but that was $30 a package, so I spent $60 on that. The hinges I already had. I've rebuilt these and reused them. These were expensive. They're $14 a piece for these latches. These handles were $8 a piece. The plywood, not the plywood, yeah, the plywood, let's go, the plywood was $24 a sheet, and there's only one sheet on the floor. The wafer board on the top was about $18, and there's one sheet up there. The 2x4s were the cheapest. They're like $3 a piece, and I used maybe 25, something like that, $75 worth of 2x4s. So that's the least expensive. There's some that's setting on pressure treated wood, which again wasn't that expensive. I got pressure treated 2x4s underneath of it. But it took me a lot longer. We had 1 week of sunny weather, and I knew I had it to get done. It's supposed to rain for the next 5 days. Since we're in quarantine and all that stuff, or sequestered, or stay at home, I figured it'd be a good project to knock out. It took me longer than I thought, a little harder than I thought. I did it all by myself, and I'm working in this little skinny area. So it'd be nice if, like when you worked on the walls, you could lay them down and have a flat part to work on, but it didn't quite fit that way. That was tough. I went ahead and painted the trim and realized a major time-saving thing I could have done, and that's paint all the trim ahead of time, all the sides and face, and then when you cut it and install it, you only have to paint the cut edges. We're trying to cut around, well, in painting it's called cutting around the edge of the trim. Trying not to get it on the lighter color was a pain. If I would have just painted it all and put it on, that would have been much better solution. But all in all, I'm happy with the way it came out.